Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Culture Drop. I am Galen, and a lot of really important conversations are happening right now about racism, racial injustice, and a lot of companies and brands and organizations are producing statements and just publicly, sort of on social media, releasing information, stepping into the conversation in support of Black Lives Matter movement, etc. And I want to talk about a really important aspect of this, which is internal communication and the communication and conversation that I think should be happening inside organizations with leaders, with teams. Talking about like how to step into those conversations in a meaningful way, and just 4 different ways that leaders can approach those conversations effectively. In a lot of conversations I've had, I know that a lot of white people don't really know what to do and how to enter that conversation. I also know that disproportionately many leaders and many people on leadership executive teams are white people, which means that by some simple math, a lot of leaders don't know what to do and approach that conversation. And I think that is unfortunately the source of a lot of like silence from white people, because of course, even if someone is very in support of this work and inclusion and diversity and equity, nobody wants to step into the conversation, say the wrong thing, and then come out looking worse than if they had never said anything at all. As a white male and somebody who has a lot of privilege, I also had the feeling of not knowing exactly perfectly how to enter this conversation. But I also know that the focus and priority right now of this time is not about me. It's not about my feelings. It is time to amplify and listen to and raise up the voices of Black people in the Black community, and lower my own voice to listen. And also at the same time, it's important not to be silent and invisible in that process. And balancing those 2 things, I think, is really important, is that it's important to listen, and it is important to join the conversation. These conversations matter, and they're important. All of these issues around racial equality, equity, injustice, diversity, they are all of our problems to stand up for and also work to dismantle inside our organizations and inside society. And yes, it's hard. Also, tough. Lucky you that the most uncomfortable part of this conversation is that you don't know how to talk about it versus having to live the realities of those things every single day and experience them the way a lot of your employees, neighbors, fellow citizens have to do every single day, in a way that you will never be able to understand because you're never able to experience them in that way. So here are 4 ways that leaders can enter this conversation in a really meaningful way and have some impact. Number 1, check in on your employees, especially your Black employees. Ask them, how are you doing? Is there anything you need from me? Is there any way that I can support you right now? Show people and prove to them that you care about them as human beings. It is never a bad look to show up and prove to somebody that you care about them and ask them how they're doing. Number 2, create some space for dialogue and listening inside your company and inside your teams. And what that can look like is bringing your team together to have some conversations and ask them, have people share, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Like, what are you going through? I think it's really important that we create that space and just have people listen and be able to talk about it and have some conversation as a team. And if you're worried about somebody saying something that you don't know how to respond to, it's like, great. You don't have to know how to respond to everything perfectly. That's like part of this conversation, is like to be vulnerable and listen and just create a space where you are just purely asking and listening so that you can understand. And for that conversation, create some ground rules. It's not a space for people to debate issues. It is a space for people to share and everyone else to just listen and hear what they had to say. Really important. Doing this shows that you're willing to have these challenging conversations and be courageous and create more connection between your teams and inside your organization, and also prove that you care about this work, that you care about the work of equity and inclusion and diversity, right? We have to have space for conversations. And on this point, don't just make this something that you are checking the box to be like, oh, we had this real great conversation about this issue. It's like, use this as a jumping off point to actually make some changes, to look at systems and processes and things that you have in place. Look at your executive leadership team. Are they completely white? Look at your organization and the way that you do things and look for opportunities to make changes that are significant around equity and inclusion and diversity. Make this an opportunity to have those conversations, ask and listen. Number 3, take ownership to educate yourself. Go and find resources, read, listen, learn, ask questions, take it upon yourself. And I'll share 2 resources that were really, really impactful for me personally. The first one is 1619. It's a podcast. You can find it easily. That will blow your mind about the history of America and some of the systems and stuff that are in place. I promise you have not listened to that. You do not know the things that are inside that. It will change the way that you think about all of all of America and how it was built and what's here. And the second resource for you is What If I Say the Wrong Thing? It's a book by Vernee Myers. It's fantastic about just illuminating your own unconscious biases and how to be a better ally and human being in that space. Both of those resources are fantastic. I promise you, if you listen to 1619 and you read that book, it will change who you are. It will change the way that you think about how you show up and contribute to this world and these conversations. Number 4, which is also important, is stop feeling like it is on you to solve racism and that you have to enter these conversations 100% perfectly with all the answers and knowing what to do. That is not the case. Be vulnerable. Be willing to ask and listen and admit and confront the things that you don't know and you don't understand. And by that, don't go to all the Black people that you know and ask them what books to read. Take it upon yourself. But listen and ask and be vulnerable. It is okay to say, as a leader in your organization, I really want to have meaningful conversations around inclusion and diversity and equity, but I don't know how. I don't know where to start. And where do we start? And start where you are and go forward. Stop having to feel like you have to be perfect. Your voice matters in this conversation, but not as the loudest one in the room, as the one who is vulnerable and listening and asking the right questions of the right people and doing this work because it matters. That's it. And those 2 resources, I say that they're a great place to start if you haven't. So that's it. Thank you. Be good to each other. I love you guys.